Corn School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Headline Amp Fungicide and Pride Seeds.
Bernard Tobin here at the Certified Crop Advisors meeting in London, Ontario today, talking with Dr. Darcy Talenko from Indiana, Purdue University. Darcy, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today, especially without much snow.
Yes, it's always nice when it's not snowing up here. It's even better if we don't have a disease called tar spot, and that's one of the things that you're talking about today.
Correct.
I want to talk about what you're seeing in your neck of the woods in Indiana and the movement of that disease north. Maybe let's start it off there. Tell us about the disease. What do we need to know? How tough is this thing?
Okay, well, so tar spot was first identified in Indiana and Illinois in 2015. We initially thought we weren't going to see much of it because it came coming out of Latin America. It has been in Latin America for over 100 years, but it was talked about as a complex. When we first found it here in the United States, it was just one pathogen, the Phylocoramatus. We didn't have the secondary pathogen, and so we just assumed it wasn't really going to be an issue. 2018 proved us wrong. From the weather conditions and stuff, we learned that we only needed the first pathogen, and so that was the first year we really saw impacts of tar spot in the Midwest, generally through Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So that area around Lake Michigan is where we had the tar spot disease epidemics and where we documented the first yield losses here in the United States.
What about the impact? You mentioned it can range depending, obviously, on the epidemic in a field.
Right, so in-field impact, it's where the pathogen is overwintering or surviving. We saw about 20 to 60 bushel yield loss here in the United States. So those fields that had severe infection, that's where we saw that impact. And in Indiana, it was about the top third of our state is where that 2018 epidemic really hit hard.
You mentioned that cool and wet is when this disease really does well, and that's the situation that we see here in Canada, in Ontario.
Correct, yes. So this disease, as we're learning about it, and we're really 1 year in officially trying to understand it here in North America, but it requires this cool temperature, 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and then it has this long period requirement of leaf wetness. 7 hours of leaf wetness at night, that's when the spores are infecting and causing the disease to blow up. So in areas where we have long morning dews or lots of rainfall, those are the areas that the disease is going to be most impactful in those areas. But again, it's those areas that we know the disease is already present. If it's not here yet, it's just something you need to be watching for. Once it gets here, then the environmental conditions are going to play a role onto whether it's going to be an issue here in Ontario.
Talk about what you're seeing in the field. Is it entering from the top of the plant down below? Is it overwintering? Residue issues?
Okay, so it's field by field. If it's already been present in a field and documented, then it's surviving on the residue, and we've done initial research on that showing that we are seeing survival of those spores in the residue. For those fields where we've had a history, you'll see the disease move up from the bottom, just like gray leaf spot or northern corn leaf blight. It's a bottom-up disease. But if you're in an area where we haven't documented tar spot, it's going to move on the weather systems, and so then it's going to come down in from the top whenever those spore showers occur. And that's kind of what we saw with some of the spreading that occurred in 2019.
Talk about, how we defend against this. What are you learning about hybrids? I mean, susceptibility, is there some defense there?
Well, when we talk about plant disease management in corn in general, looking for resistance is first, and then if we need to use a fungicide, that would be our secondary choice. So looking at the hybrids across Indiana and the Midwest, we saw a range of susceptibility. We're just getting some initial data on North American hybrids of whether there's any that really show true resistance. But it will be important if you have those questions to ask your dealers, do they know if it has tar spot resistance, especially if you're in one of those locations that it's at a higher risk.
I guess the next level of defense is fungicides. You've been doing some work at Purdue and with growers. Talk about what you're learning, from an onset perspective and timing.
So timing is going to be very critical for this disease. You need to scout early, and then that early scouting is going to trigger whether we need to apply a fungicide or not. Generally for corn, our fungicides are going out at VTR1. We're telling most of our growers not to change that unless you know you have a problem with tar spot. Our first year in after this last season in 2019, our VT1 timing of the fungicide worked perfectly for when the disease started. But if the disease starts earlier, we may need to shift that fungicide application earlier, and then it may trigger a second one if we're that into the season the disease continues to spread. But again, we don't have that data yet. We're only 1 year in. So this coming season, hopefully we'll get some more information if the epidemic starts earlier or later, depending on the weather conditions that we see.
Any advice for growers? You mentioned obviously the need to get out and scout, and when they're scouting, what should they be looking for?
So tar spot's unique is it produces these, the disease description is like you splatter tar on a corn. But it's embedded in that tissue. So we've had false reports early on with insect frass. Insect frass, if you scratch at it, it's going to come off the leaf. Tar spot, if you scratch at it, it's embedded. It's growing within that tissue. That stroma is there, invisible. It's a very dark stroma. And I think that's one way to really look at it. If you're looking, rusts may also mimic tar spot. There, if you look closely at that, there's a pustule rupturing on that leaf surface. Not with tar spot. It's like it's embedded and growing within the tissue, and it sometimes may be raised or not. And then and if you have questions, again, the best way to confirm it is to send a sample off to your disease diagnostic lab, and then they would give you a better confirmation.
Final question, Dr. Flenko. You've seen a lot of diseases come and go. We've been covering this business for a long time. What do you think of this one? I mean, some rapid growth and some rapid movement here. How big of an impact could this disease have?
Well, it has, I guess, because of what we're seeing on the rapid disease, the disease cycle rapidly explodes into the canopy, that it has a potential to really significantly impact yield. But it really depends on how the disease is moving. Is it really present within an area? Is it going to cause that issue? I think it's here to stay. We're going to be fighting it in northern Indiana from now on until we, maybe we'll discover some hybrids and then it won't be a problem if we get good resistance out there. But again, I think it's going to be a disease we're going to continue to see along with gray leaf spot and northern cornleaf blight and other ones.
Well, thank you for stopping by and good luck. We'll be watching.
Okay, thank you very much.